Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, August 12th, 2023. And before we get into where the market is now and where I'm looking for moving forward, let's just go into what we had last week. Uh, Coming into the week, what I was looking for was mostly 65 to 45.45 to trade. We end up with the high of the week at, I think, 44 and three quarters, and I think the low of the week was right around 59. So uh, it was quite a rotational week as I was expecting. And similarly on the Nasdaq, what I was looking for was 150 to 500. That might have been, you know what, pretty close. 150 over here, 500 I think marked the high of the week, somewhere around there, 480. So pretty close. It was a rotational week, however, it was very, very whipsawy. You saw aggressive liquidations into the close repeatedly. You saw this thing bid up with short covers at night, and the CPI print tried to get a breakout going and just failed epically. What I was looking for was a little bit lower. I wanted to see us get into around 44.40 on the ES and a little bit, and I thought we'd hold 15,000 on the NASDAQ, which it was true. We held, I think, right below the prior month's low, somewhere around there. So overall, had it pretty accurately. What I want to emphasize, though, is that we only really had, I think, something like a 90-point range week. Where's Monday's high here? So we made the CPI high and the low down there, 85.5 points roughly. So nothing crazy. We ramped on the Monday after Friday's liquidation. We crapped out overnight. It was just this kind of ramp, crap out sort of thing. CPI was that day where this to me was the day where we were trying to break out of these 45.40s, and we failed. We failed miserably. and the tell sign for me was when the sell into the close was not the heavy liquidations we've been having all week, but instead it was this steady sell downwards, meaning that it wasn't these very aggressive shorts into the close, which would subsequently need to cover. It was a steady sell, a steady, secure sell, nothing rushed. So that was the important part to me. Now, Friday managed to accept below our balance point here at 44.84 for the most part. We spent pretty much the entire day below it. I got short 85s. This thing is now closing one tick off my 84 balance point level. So what am I thinking here? Well, we were also unable to tag last week's VWAP close. We were unable to tag the halfback. Clearly, to me, we've lost momentum as we got below the second half, or sorry, below the yearly second standard deviation of VWAP. Let me see if I can just pull that up for you guys. Let me copy this over. There you go. So for a while, we were riding that second standard deviation over here, and we lost it. And I had signaled on that Wednesday session that I think we've lost that ultra bullish momentum that we'd been getting used to, and instead we should look for more sort of two-way trade, maybe even slightly favoring the short side below 85ish. And I think that's been pretty accurate. So that's kind of where the ES is at. The Nasdaq. The Nasdaq has taken a bit more of a beating than the ES, and it's fallen off a little bit more here. We were unable to breach last week's point of control. That's roughly where we put in a high of the week. I think about, I don't know, 20 points higher or something like that. We were unable to breach the first half of the year's high there at 475s. That's roughly where the Monday and Tuesday highs were. So unable to breach that critical level. That's also where we were bid off on July 24th. The CPI print, unlike on ES, the CPI print on that Thursday session, unable to break the high of the week. So overall, just behaving weaker than the ES and actually cracking the July monthly low on that Friday session. We didn't really, flush it, but I'm sure we ran some stops or something. So overall, the NQ looking weaker than ES. Perhaps it's due for a bid. Perhaps ES tries to get something going along with it. So let's get into what I'm looking for coming into next week. Let's start off with the S&Ps over here. News-wise, not really a lot. Retail sales, FOMC minutes, unemployment numbers. This is going to be probably this week and next week is looking like probably the more boring weeks of the year until we get into December. So I'm not really going to be looking for any sort of huge moves here. Sorry, one last thing. Perhaps of note is that we also managed to tag pretty much the exact halfback of this balance. If you take like the high to here to the low of here, we hit the halfback to the tick. So if this is your balance zone, hitting the middle right here. So this kind of becomes the point where you think, okay, are we going to, we ramped back to the highs of this balance? Are we going to accept above, or do we come back below and get to the lower end? That is just something to take note of. Anyway, I'm looking for a slower, boring week. No huge moves. In my opinion, I think we go a little bit lower. Maybe we get into 44.20s or something like that. I don't think you're going to get some sort of epic flush. I think that holds off for September. August tends to be a rotational month, I believe, on average, giving a percentage return of 0.1%. Considering we opened this thing way up here somewhere, wherever that is, somewhere around here, 4,600, there's a possibility we just ramp back up there. Or perhaps we go down to 45.50s, something like that. So I think that's overall what this is setting up for is, finding a low of the month somewhere around here, and then we ramp to around here for the end of the month. September does whatever it does. That's a bit outside of my forecasting, if you want to call it that. So you'll notice here we have two pivots to make things confusing. This one is in the lighter shade, and that's going to be the main one. Let's get into this so this doesn't become a 20-minute video. If we're able to break this 64 to 82 area, I think you're getting into the lower half of that balance I just mentioned. You're getting into this sort of area below the prior week's low. You're getting into this zone over here. Once we get into 44.19 or so, that being the monthly low. So after a break of the monthly low or somewhere around there, there is a monthly point of control and weekly point of control, a handful of ticks below the monthly low, if I recall correctly. Just checking my charts here. Yes, that is correct. At 44.19s, the RTH monthly low coming in at 19.5. So if you break that monthly low, come a little bit lower, reclaim that old weekly low at 44.24 is right there, and then you start rotating above. Let's call it 44.39s, 38s, where another weekly point of control is sitting. I think you end up having salvaged this lower part of the balance that I talked about. Again, this being the balance. I think you've ran those stops, those July low stops. You reclaim this, and it ends up being a rotation back into last week's low, perhaps even higher, and I would argue maybe into up here. Now, getting above 45.05, and I think bears have kind of screwed the pooch. I think that this thing will start to crazily. No, I'm not talking about this sort of end of the world capitulation for shorts, but I think you end up with a nice trend up scenario up to something like 45.20s, up to something like 45, 26, 36, somewhere around there. You get into some of these higher numbers. Just checking my charts here. Weekly value area high from last week, 18s. The extensions of those value areas, 32s, 36s, 38s. The second standard deviation of last week's VWAP, 39s. I think you start getting into this zone. I don't see us breaking that weekly high. I don't see that. Now, if we do break that weekly high and we do get over 65s, you can call the breakout successful, and I would look for rotation back upwards to the monthly open, somewhere around there. Yeah, let's call it 4,600. So what I would mostly be looking for this week is something like this. Something like that. You've got the VWAP close from last week at 02, so something like that. That in itself is a 100-point range. So maybe even just something like this. The top of this pivot zone down to something like that. A 95-point range. I think Monday ends up being your churn day per usual. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, perhaps you move down. Friday, perhaps you move up. Something like that. I don't think it's going to be a very elaborate week or really a surprise week. The Nasdaq is going to be a little bit different. Same idea. We've got two little pivot zones. Again, the brighter one being the more important one. Below 15K, give or take, opens up the idea of getting into 14,000, or sorry, gets into 14,530. Maybe I should write that 14,530. That being where we have this contract gap. That's what I'm looking for. I don't think you'll get into that, to be quite honest. I'm not too sure this thing craps out that hard. In order to do so, we'd be talking about a move below the third standard deviation of last week's VWAP, which is at 920. I just maybe we diddle a little bit below it, but in general, I think we'll maintain this kind of 15,000 number. Maybe I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. I do not know for the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq is much more has much more of an ability to trend compared to the ES. You have the -3 standard deviation of monthly VWAP from July at 840s. I don't really see us crapping out that hard in mid-August. It just doesn't really seem to line up with everything. Instead, what I would look for is a reclaim of this area here, pretty much these Wednesday lows. Wednesday lows, Thursday's kind of what is that, like CPI low kind of thing that happened. Reclaim these lows, rotate back up to the weekly VWAP close around 260, the weekly half back there, the weekly point of control just at 280s, this kind of zone here. If we start to reclaim this kind of 342 number, it's the same as reclaiming 4505. I think you start to get that move up to this first half of the year's high at 475s, and the breakout becomes successful if we can get above 560s and get back into this balance here, this upper balance. Hope that makes sense. Sorry, a little bit all over the place, but I don't think this week is going to be, in general, some sort of major sell or buy week. I think it's going to be a little bit of dripping downwards on the ES, down to around 44.19ish, that monthly low. We reclaim it. In the rest of the month, I'm mostly looking for uppies. Same with the Nasdaq. I think, sure, maybe we get into 14,900, and then we head back up to something like 475 for the end of the year, for the end of the month. Sorry. Currently, as of now, the first standard deviation of yearly VWAP sitting at 4391s on the ES. So right around here, so maybe that ramps up to about 4400 or 4410. This thing has kept that number bid all year. Let me just pull that back up for you guys, and I'll be done here. 13 minutes. We've managed to keep. Here's the first standard deviation here. We've managed to keep this somewhat bid all year. Since about April. It's been relatively bid. Move back up right now and put us at 4,600, which had capped us for pretty much the whole year. That second standard deviation. So, a move down to around 4,400, and then a move back up to 4,500, 4,550-ish for the end of the month. That's how I'm looking at this thing. Hope that makes sense. Hope that helps. Sorry, a little bit all over the place. Have a great week. Trade safe.